What's the worst scandal to happen at your school? Two things, both in middle school. I was at home on a Sunday watching the news with my mom when all of a sudden my 6th grade teacher's mugshot showed up and it said that her and her husband were pulled over and the police found like 6 pounds of high grade weed. Lead to a search warrant for their home and they literally slept on her inflatable mattress. The whole house was a grow up. She did look like a hippie but I don't understand. She was not mellow at all. She was a bee. In 8th grade, one of my friend's parents had cancer. He thought it was a good idea to bring some of their meds to school and hand them out like candy. These were strong meds, and not all of them were pain pills. At least 5 kids overdosed, 2 of them had seizures. No one died thankfully. A guy in year 10 made a statement that the more compact a group of people are, the higher the death toll would be in a shooting, and we were genuinely talking about shootings and somehow people mistook it that he was gonna do it. It was a joke and everyone was playing along at first. Cut to 11 months later. He was in year 11. The whole school knows. Rumors got out. The truth was beyond effing twisted and changed to something different. Kids were actually scared to come in. Parents were pissed. Teachers were anxious. They had to search the kid. They kicked him out 9 days before he finished for good. Was still allowed to do exams but had to do separately from everyone else. The police were involved and it made the news, but the news article is complete fake and bullsh. He also wasn't allowed to prom. This was around 4-5 years ago. He told me he was doing a lot better now. He went to a better school for 6th form. He says whilst he has moved on with his life, he will never forgive the bastards. Also, we live in England and guns are much harder to get, especially to the average person who knows nothing about how to get guns. I was in 8th grade at the time. But the high school I would be attending the next year had a massive hazing scandal that made international news overnight. A group of junior girls trying to join the Powder Puffs went to play football against the seniors. Instead of playing, they got the sh kicked out of them, were forced to sit in a huddle on the ground while paint and animal intestines were thrown at them. And one girl even had a bucket put over her head as it was hit with baseball bats. I heard later on she suffered permanent hearing loss. Someone recorded it. This was before smartphones, so someone had a literal camcorder and released it to the media. The senior girls that were identified were suspended, many of them losing college admissions, and some parents were arrested when it was found out they supplied alcohol. When I started high school we had to endure multiple school assemblies every year about how hazing is bad, and participate in week-long seminars about being more caring and considerate of our fellow students. My school had a similar situation, but male students were making paddles in wood shop class and using them to paddle incoming freshmen. These weren't the thin hazing paddles that you sometimes see in movies. They were 2x6s with holes drilled in them and a carved handle on one end. One of the ones that they showed us in our assembly the next year was so big it took 2 hands to wield it. One kid had his tailbone broken from being hit so many times. The football coach was also the woodshop teacher and he kept his job, but he was no longer allowed to coach football or teach woodshop. Our state champion football program disintegrated. He was allowed to start coaching again a few years ago and they are almost back at the level they were, and there is no more hazing that we know of. There was also a car accident where 1 kid died and 2 others were in a coma after a pre-homecoming event. It wasn't school sanctioned, but it happened on the football field. There was lots of alcohol involved and they were on a winding country road. We also had a girl get hit and die when some high school kids were drag racing. Not that scandalous. A friend's stuff kept going missing, like books and pens. It didn't stop even after multiple complaints from him and the teachers didn't really care. His mom screamed at the teachers and the principal did her own investigation and concluded that it was a boy who stole from that guy. The principal decided to call the male student's parents to talk to them. After a year, it turns out that the thief was a girl and she yeeted the guy's stuff out the window because the guy was bullying her. We had a computer teacher football assistant coach who was just blasted all day. Had so many DUIs he had to get rides to work, but was the cousin of the superintendent so he kept his job. Let's just say that when he crashed a student's car in the parking lot because he convinced them to let him borrow it, that was the beginning of the end of it. It was a small town. The scandal is that the super tried to cover it up by trying to convince the kid to take the heat for it. To no one's surprise, the kid was not convinced. They let him stay on as super for another 2 years. This happened between my sister and brother graduating. so it would have been 1996 or 1997. The HS Ag teacher started dating a student at some point. Everyone knew about it and the parents consented. Our HS was, and is, small enough to still participate in senior trips, and the AG teacher went along as a chaperone when his GF was a senior. They shared a hotel room. When I believe the student was still technically a 17 years old minor. At the time I remember my parents being rather put off by it, but they still hired the guy as a summer farm hand. I don't remember if he was fired or stepped down, but by the time I made it to HS we had a different ag teacher. They got married and had a child. Divorce maybe 5 or 10 years ago. The kid goes to our HS now. I don't know why it wasn't a huge deal at the time, but no one really raised a stink or threatened to call the authorities. Today it feels like a case of grooming by a predatory farm boy. One year in exams days they were trying to add a new method to prevent cheating where a man from the administration comes to every class before every exam and collects students' phones while sticking a sticker with a number on each phone and giving the same sticker to the student so he can get his phone after school without anyone taking someone else's phone that looks alike or something. This was working at first and a bit preventing cheating until one day some guy sneaked into our high school and came as the man who collects the phones while he wasn't. He stole the whole high school phones and went lol. Here I was thinking the guy hacking a teachers around and receiving exam answers was a big deal. There was this guy in high school, pretty shy, didn't have too many friends, was always trying to fit in. Kind of a poser but in an insecure way. I'll call him Pumpkin Pie for privacy reasons. So one day Pumpkin Pie had the genius idea to impress his class and make them like him more. To get the Chem geography teacher and retrieve the exam question from his school account, he used a USB stick with a program on it that retrieves saved passwords from most browsers, Chrome, i.e. Edge wasn't a thing yet, Firefox, etc. He waited for the perfect moment to plug it in. The teacher was taking a quick bathroom break. The whole class saw it and he made up some excuse. Don't remember what he said. Everyone kind of forgot about it. He checked the teacher's school account every day for a couple months, until finally the teacher uploaded the exam questions. Pumpkin Pie downloaded the exams. Then and this is where he effed up, he gave them to people in his class that he liked. Those people started talking, and eventually people from other classes started asking Pumpkin Pie if he could get the answers for their class too. So then exams came round. He asked his classmates not to make it too obvious that they knew all the answers. Of course, they did. They all had way higher grading than usual. One day he received a call from the school, which never happened before. Basically they said, "Hi Pumpkin Pie, you need to come to the school and talk to the principal right now." He asked why, and then his heart dropped as she said, "Because it looks like you committed fraud." Apparently they saw the discrepancy in the grades and went looking in the logs of the teacher's account access and found that it was accessed from an IP address which Pumpkin Pie also logged in from. Dumb FR didn't even use a VPN. Then he realized how much he had FR'd up. See, he had just turned 18, which meant that he would be treated as an adult should the police ever get involved. Anyway, he went to school and had a really hard decision to make. Either the whole class would have to redo the exam, or he gave the names of the people he gave the exams to and only they would have to retake it. He chose the latter, and everyone hated him for it. Him and the classmates involved weren't invited to the graduation ceremony. Oh, and the hacked teacher was considering pressing charges for privacy violation. Somehow he managed to convince the teacher not to. He's so effing lucky. Anyway, he was already insecure and at this point he just could look any of his classmates in the eyes anymore. He ended up moving countries eventually, and now he uses a dumb alias online whenever he talks about it. Something with a pumpkin. Not sure why at this point since it's pretty obvious he's talking about himself. This girl accused a teacher, who had been there for over 40 years, of sexual assault right before her entrance exam. It was a really good private school so you needed to take a test to be considered for admission. The accusations were investigated and were found completely and founded almost immediately. I don't know what this girl was thinking. Like maybe she thought it was a way for her to get some leverage and improve her chances of getting in or something. What made this scandal even bigger was the actions of the school. They kept him in the dark for 2 months after the investigation was completed and were refusing to allow him back because of their insurance. Then a campaign was launched by a bunch of alums and he eventually got back to teaching. Until his death a few years ago, he was a great guy too. I had him for a political theory class and he was really nice. He and his wife, aside from having children of their own, took in foster kids all the time and he did a lot of other volunteer work. Sucks he had to go through all of that because of a lie.